Yesterday, even the Secretary of State for Health, the second one to do so, in fact, conceded that he is uneasy, even uncomfortable. I would suggest that his discomfort is nothing next to the lifelong damage the trial will potentially do to an extremely vulnerable cohort of children that we should be protecting. That funny feeling in his stomach, oh, he's left, that's his good judgment trying to be heard. He won't hear it if he's gone out there. It is not too late for him to listen to it. As one of my honourable friends said yesterday, I too believe he is a good man being placed under intolerable pressure on this issue, but he needs to find his courage. We know, Madam Deputy Speaker, that the number of children and young people presenting to the UK NHS with gender distress increased dramatically in the years after 2009, with an exponential rise from around 2014. What is behind the increase among Gen Z is unclear, and the reasons are likely to be multifaceted. It is speculated that the factors may include 24/7 internet access, increased acceptance of trans identities, or even peer, social and cultural influences. Over the last 20 years, we have seen groups such as Stonewall and Mermaids call for better access to treatment and more rights for trans people. Large corporates have gone big on diversity and inclusion to boost their brands. Impactful TV dramas. I will, of course, give way.
I'm slightly concerned. Thank you for giving way, but I am slightly concerned about the idea that trans acceptance is part of the problem. Does the honourable member accept that trans acceptance is completely reasonable and that trans people have always been here?
I thank the Honourable Lady for the intervention. I'm not saying it's a negative thing. I'm trying to explain why we've seen an increase in the numbers of young people with gender dysphoria. I'm using those stating facts as we were just talking about the importance of doing that. So in 2009, only 51 patients were referred to GIDS, the NHS Gender Identity Development Service for Children, of whom 2/3 were male. In 2016, there were 1,766 referrals, and 2/3 of them were female. That is quite the change. There has been an overall surge in the number of children suffering gender distress, but the increase is especially notable among girls. We also see overrepresentation of neurodiversity, mental health issues and trauma in this group. To put it another way, these children are much more likely to have been in care, to suffer with anxiety and depression, to be autistic and to have been abused. It is a group of incredibly vulnerable children. GIDS was established in 1989. Its main approach to treatment at that time was therapeutic, referred to as watchful waiting. Early studies from the 1980s showed that in around 85% of cases, the gender incongruence or distress ceased in the child after going through puberty. Later studies reached a similar conclusion, with between 67% and 90% desisting after puberty. Only a small cohort of children continued to experience gender dysphoria or incongruence after puberty, and it was that extremely small group who would likely adopt a permanent trans identity in adulthood.
My honourable friend give way.
I will, of course, give way.
I thank my honourable friend for giving way. Recently, the government has announced that they are going to be legislating to prevent under-16s from viewing social media. We already ban under-16s from drinking alcohol and smoking because we do not believe that they should be protected from doing things now that may have impacts on them negatively later in life, particularly in their health. Does my honourable friend think that should sit in this category of protections for children?
My honourable friend makes an excellent point. I completely agree with him. A child of this age cannot possibly consent to the life-changing, irreversible changes that come from puberty blockers. And the thing we need to remember is that when a child, almost all of them that start puberty blockers go on to cross-sex hormones, and there's no going back from that. We also need to remember we have already had a trial in the UK. So when we started using puberty blockers in the UK after 2011, the preliminary results came out in 2015-16 and did not demonstrate psychological benefits, with some of the females actually suffering a worsening of symptoms, including higher incidence of wanting to hurt or kill themselves. The results of the study, which were not formally published in 2020, demonstrated no statistically significant improvement in gender dysphoria or mental health outcomes. It is also important to remember the early studies that told us in a majority of cases going through puberty resolved gender distress. It follows, therefore, that stopping or delaying puberty using medication derails that natural desistance, essentially locking in. I will, of course, give way.
Thank you. Thank you to the honourable member. And as a member of a political class and a medical class, would she not accept that it's better for politicians to accept advice from medical experts around medical issues?
Thank my honourable friend for that excellent question. So I obviously always respect and listen to different clinicians, but what is happening with this debate is one set of clinicians with one view are being listened to. And let me remind everyone about lobotomies. There were lots of very respected people that came out with lobotomies. In fact, the person behind it won a Nobel Prize. And I think we would all agree that those clinicians got that wrong. So it's really incumbent upon us in this House to always question. So I think it's absolutely right that we listen to clinicians, but unfortunately we are seeing only one set of clinicians with one set of opinions being listened to here. I would also just like to highlight that a Finnish study was published in April this year which looked at more than 2,000 adolescents and young adults who had been referred to gender services. It found that medical interventions did not reduce psychiatric problems and may even be associated with worsening mental health. So how many times have we heard it said that puberty blockers offer a pathway towards improved mental health and reduced psychiatric distress for those struggling with gender identity? I've lost count, but there is hard evidence that not only says different, it says the opposite. So I'd be keen to understand from the Minister and the Secretary of State whether this study has been taken into account before deciding to go ahead with the trial. I think the other thing I just want to point out is the fact that young people, children that would grow up to be same-sex attracted are overrepresented in this cohort. And that is something we really need to think about. And if you look at the case of Kira Bell, she was a lesbian struggling with her sexuality, and instead of people saying, it's okay to find girls, other women attractive, there's nothing wrong with that, you do not need to change your body, but instead people said, you've got gender dysphoria, and they put her on to puberty blockers, and then she went on to testosterone shots, she then had her breasts removed in a double mastectomy, and then she detransitioned. So I would say to everyone, this is a deeply homophobic approach to healthcare. It is. And those people on the other side of the benches, on the other side of the argument to this, they think they have the progressive position. But I'm sorry, you are repeating mistakes that have been made historically.